In late 2025, the U.S. economy just went off the rails. A radical new trade policy was put into play, and the results were immediate. They were dramatic, and they were completely unexpected. This is the story of how one single economic number changed everything.
This is it. This is the number that kicked everything off. In August of 2025, the U.S. trade deficit, that's the gap between what we buy from the world and what we sell to it, suddenly plummeted by a staggering 23.8%. On paper, this looked like a huge win.
But was it? I mean, a shrinking deficit is usually great news, right? It's a sign of a stronger, more competitive economy. This time, though, that number was hiding a much more complicated and, frankly, a much more painful story.
So to really understand what happened, we're going to break this down into 4 parts. We have the radical plan, the unexpected consequence, the voters' final verdict, and then the big pivot that came right after.
Okay, so let's start with the plan itself. The new administration had one main economic goal: to rebalance America's trade. And their approach was aggressive, built around a powerful new idea.
They called it punitive reciprocity. The idea was pretty simple, really. Hit every country with a baseline tariff, and then add extra penalties on countries with big trade surpluses or those who aren't playing by America's geopolitical rules. It was a trade policy designed to be a hammer.
And at first, man, it looked like it was working. Now what's fascinating here is how that 23.8% drop happened. Take a close look at the numbers. Exports barely budged. The entire change came from a massive 5.1% collapse in imports. Stuff just stopped coming into the U.S.
So, the deficit was fixed, mission accomplished. But as businesses and consumers were about to find out, shrinking the deficit this way came with a very, very steep price.
Because that victory on the trade balance? Well, it was about to be felt at every single supermarket checkout. The economic pain was about to get personal.
The official line from the White House was crystal clear: there is no inflation problem. The cost of these tariffs, they argued, was being paid by other countries, not by American consumers.
But the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it told a completely different story. Prices for basic food items were skyrocketing. The cost of ground beef shot up by almost 13% and steak by a whopping 17% in just 1 year. This wasn't theoretical. This was the price of dinner.
And it wasn't just meat. The universal tariffs hit products that the U.S. doesn't even really produce, like coffee, bananas, and cocoa. Since there's no domestic industry to protect, the tariffs acted like a pure tax on consumers. Critics quickly nicknamed it the breakfast tax.
The cost of putting food on the table was becoming a crisis. And history teaches us that when voters feel that kind of economic pain, they tend to voice their feelings pretty loudly at the ballot box.
The November state elections in places like Virginia and New Jersey suddenly became a national referendum. This wasn't just about local issues anymore. It was about the price of groceries.
And the results were decisive. AP VoteCast polling showed that for half of all voters, the economy was the single most important issue, dwarfing everything else. It wasn't even close. And here's the real heart of the problem. The administration was thinking about these big picture items like the trade deficit and geopolitics. But voters? They were focused on their kitchen table, the cost of living, inflation, and their own family's finances. There was a massive disconnect.
The election results sent a political earthquake through Washington. The message from voters was impossible to ignore. The administration was now trapped. They had to fix the inflation problem they said didn't exist, but without looking like they were abandoning their signature policy.
Which brings us to the pivot. What happened next was a stunningly fast and pragmatic reversal. In a matter of days, the entire trade strategy that had defined the year was turned completely on its head.
This timeline tells the whole story. The state elections deliver a punishing verdict. Just days later, facing a political crisis, the president signs an executive order and begins to dismantle the very tariffs that caused the problem.
And just look at what was exempted. Beef, to bring down meat prices. Coffee and bananas, to get rid of that breakfast tax. Even certain fertilizers, to lower costs for American farmers. It was a surgical strike aimed directly at the products causing the most political pain.
This is the new strategy in action. This wasn't a return to free trade. It was something new: managed trade. Think of it this way. Instead of open markets, the administration started hand-picking partners for specific deals. They cut deals with allies like Argentina for beef and Ecuador for bananas to secure cheap supply chains and reward political friends. So what are the big lessons from all this? First, voters have a limit when it comes to inflation.
Second, that huge drop in the trade deficit, it was an illusion created by choking off imports, and it came at a huge cost. And third, the new model isn't free trade or protectionism, but this complex system of managed trade.
Which leaves us with one last big question hanging in the air. We just saw a major economic policy reversed almost overnight because of an election. If policy just becomes a reactive tool to win short-term votes, what does that mean for the long-term stability of the U.S. and the global economy?